I just want to say thank you, give a special thank you to Cy, because all I agreed to do is like make some local stuff happen, and as everyone has seen, I've been a little slow off the mark. I knew that Cy would actually organize the conference if I freed him from worrying about space and food, and so that's what's happened. And so I just wanted to do a special thank you for that, and apology for the other thing. He asked me to talk about the beginning of the conference. I go pretty far back, although not quite to the beginning. I go back a little bit through our history and some things that I found. And, you know, so this picture, clouds, you know, it's a little isolated. That's how we felt if we were Conlangers in '91, or when I felt when I was in high school. Some of you are my age, and you know that, right? You never thought you'd meet another person who did what Tolkien did, unless maybe he was a famous author and happened to have written that amazing book that actually got it out there. And yet, for whatever reason, often at a young age, some of you started younger than I did, this became attractive, and you started to do it, and there was this feeling of isolation. So click to the next slide. And so that's kind of what it felt like. It's beautiful, but it's empty sand stretching off to the horizon. Next slide is where we are today, I think. It's electric. It's alive. This is the Z Machine Collider. It emits a lot of sparks when it's running, just as a side effect of what it's doing, which is invisible. That's kind of what conlanging feels like. I am not as involved because I don't have as much time, but there's ZBB, which is a whole huge community that I don't even really know. There is the Conlang list, which some people now think of me as the advanced group and the big kids. You know, there's, you know, so now we have a community that even has status levels where before nobody knew anyone at all. And this is kind of a fantastic thing, and and I thought it was interesting that technology made that happen, so that now we can be face-to-face because we were able to be together when we were not face-to-face before. So Despina to the next one. Scroll down a little. I'm not expecting you guys to read this, but I went more. I was just going to read, no, scroll down and hit the Command plus, make the text bigger. Yeah, there we go, fine. Karsten found this from, welcome to the Constructed Languages mailing list. When it became a list, as opposed to a bunch of people who met on Usenet, was, as they found, July 29th, 1991. Nobody knows who John Ross, the guy who sent this mail, is. I met him. He was in physics at BU, and he did the list as a completely non-technical guy just because he could get access to the server. This was that kind of day. So that was the time. I didn't come in till 92 or 93. Next tab, I think. If you go down a little bit, I happened to find a thread about the Codex Seraphinianus. There's a copy in the posters. We've seen a famous invisible book, and you know, this was Richard Kennaway, Jacques Guy, who has not been on the list for a very long time, was a voyage manuscript scholar and linguist. There were, you know, a very different community. Auxlangs were all kind of in the mix at that point. It was all together. Lojbab of Lojban was one of the very first wave coming in. So this is, you know, a really small group. And again, suddenly we knew about it. And I found out from another early guy who I knew in person and got on the list. Next tab, and this is just to support the dates. Then when I started sending, this is a test, are we live? This is a test. The final one in February says Sigh, I'm getting to hate this. Next tab, it was actually live at Brown. I sent a bunch of instructions. 7th of February, you know, so this was the original instructions and list. Go down a bit more. And if you just scroll to the very bottom, the first poster on the reconstructed list is here, and it was not me. Here, yeah, it was Tony Harris. And it was about science fiction languages. And I found an earlier science fiction languages thread from '93. Interestingly, the split, the Conlang split, which people always asked about, and I could never remember when it happened. It happened on the original Denmark mailing list in '96. It generated a long discussion thread, and so that was the time. So the split was just before it came to Brown. So people will sometimes ask about that. And I think I had one final tab, which I'm not quite ready for. So I thought there were two things. I have very minimal analysis about this, but one was that we could communicate. But there's another thing that the Conlang list, I think, why that is kind of a landmark for me and for, even if you don't know it, all of you people who came in earlier or are still hanging out on Zombist. We got a name. Up to that point, there's this garbage category in the LC catalog. Languages, artificial languages, there was no name for what we did. There was no verb for doing it. I think having a name for yourself really changed the whole thing. Suddenly someone can say, I'm interested in Conlang, and there's at least a way that they know that there's a thing to be. So now I'm going to turn it over. Well, you can speak under either of you two identities that might even come into it. So the final tab is just, I talked about this for years. Sally in 2000 wrote an article about the phenomenon of this network communication, and it was, of course, an article not for our audience at all. So this is one of the times that our community started to come out into the broader world of scholarship. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sally for reminiscences. And
if you keep that up there,
if you got questions about the old days, we'll do.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to reiterate my wonderful gratefulness to Cy and David and the other David and Pete, for putting all of this together, and also for inspiring me. Thank you, David, for coming here, because I didn't have any money, and so I just blew off a lot of Amex to be here. And so I'm slated to talk a little bit about my experiences of joining Conlang and what it did to me. I came onto Conlang in the listserv around 1998, and that's where I was heartily greeted by Ann Rosta and David and quite a number of other people who were there, John Cowan. And my finding Conlang was somewhat arbitrary. I mean, somebody asked me, "Oh, you make up a language. Have you heard of the Conlang list?" I said, "No." And he said, "Well, you got to sign up." And so quickly I did, and I was amazed and humiliated. I felt sort of the same way that I did when I discovered Tolkien, because I was making up my tail off at 9, and then Tolkien came along, and I thought I was amazed. And am I allowed to take this?
As you're doing,
Oh, I see.
So keep talking.
All right. Brand new internet?
Yes.
Did you hear anything I said before?
We did.
Okay.
Sorry. Please come here. You should be.
All right. Well, I came on in 1998. All right. I was amazed and I was humiliated. But what it did was help me, through a community, learn quite a lot about linguistics that I hadn't learned, and out of sheer enthusiasm and slight competitive feeling, I really began to improve Deonath. It was through your help that I started developing the volitional, non-volitional element in Deonath and a number of other things. But let me see. What I was struck with basically was that Tolkien, what would Tolkien have done on Conlang? Would he have felt so solitary? Would he have looked at his Elvish and thought, well, maybe I can improve it. He said basically that he sorely missed any kind of community, so infrequently did people expose themselves that he never knew, no one ever knew who the geniuses were, and I love this, the splendid primitives. And now we do, sort of. What I did on the Conlang is I decided to take a couple of surveys, actually 3, under the lunatic, the name lunatic survey, because thank you. Yes, the young Yagello, right. Thank you very much. She is the lunatic lovers of language. Thank you. I haven't looked at that book for ages because it enraged me so much. So I called it the Lunatic Survey, and what I found out from those of you who answered me was that, well, first of all, the men greatly outnumbered the women. And that half of you were into some kind of digital profession. Either you were linguists or you were computer analysts, and that seemed to make sense, right? Yes, so what I did is I put some of these statistics into this, well, not statistics, remarks into this essay here, which is from MC, the Journal of Media and Communication. And this was my first foray outside of the Conlang to make it known to other people. It sort of fell into a hole, but what I'm hoping will happen is that what Conlang did is it made me very interested in researching past languages before Tolkien, way before Tolkien. Archilochus, I found out, Alexarchus of Macedonia invented his own language in the 4th century BC, and he was considered slightly mad. That was another thing. How many people came out, I said, about your invented language besides your parents and your friends? Did anybody tell their professors or their bosses about this? And it was sort of half and half. Some people were shy about it. Alexarchus wasn't at all, and he was sequestered on an island that he called Aeropolis, or the city of heaven, where he conducted his life with that. And I go up, but my book is mainly about Hildegard of Bingen in the 12th century, and I have a couple of defective books about that I brought. They're missing the. Do I have 10 minutes left? Okay, well, I'll be wrapping up sooner than that. But I wrote this book, and it came out last year, and it's not just Hildegard of Bingen's lingua ignota. She was a 12th century abbess in Germany, near the Rhine, and she was well known for her obstinance and her stubbornness and her inventiveness. People mostly know her from her music. She composed what she calls symphoniae, and the lyrics to go with it. She was a poet. She was a healer, supposedly. She was very interested in the human body and its illnesses. She wrote a book on that. She wrote a book on her visions. She had a number of, constant visions that she saw and wrote about. And she invented a language on top of that. It's called the lingua ignota, the unknown language. And so I spent some very, 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 very tedious hours and days translating 1,011 words. Most of them were easy because they had the Latin translations, but some of the German was very obscure, especially for pickaxe. things of that sort. She had the whole world scripted in this, in a kind of a taxonomy for her invented language. And she said she derived it from God, and she said that it was to be the pumice stone for humankind. And but are devoted to God and His servants. And after that, it starts with members of the family, and then it goes down to in great length all the parts of the body with no modesty whatsoever. And people leave that out when they're talking about her. And she ends with she goes through the architecture of the church and the villages and what's in the villages and the workers and the hierarchies, all the way down to, and she ends with nature. She ends with insects. Okay, the last word is kavi, it's cricket. But what I tried to do, that was, because it has been talked about, is I tried to put her in context with the invented languages that I researched. And I have a whole chapter here on Conlang and the community. And I've actually looked at Sylvia Sotomayer's text, and I have named a number of you in this with your permission. And my conclusion was that Hildegard of Bingen's unknown language was more like what we are doing than any, like Esperanto or the religious language. That she was having fun with it under the aegis of a religious vocation. But she had media. She put it in a manuscript. That was media then. She had sound bites. She made a song. Okay, she created an antiphon that has 5 of her invented words. I know how to sing it. I won't do it here. She had some kind of a community. There were a number of people who knew about this. And the main difference is that she claimed that it came from God, and one of the lunatic survey questions was, how spiritual is your language? I got almost 0 response. So whether you claim that it comes from yourself, whether you claim that you had inspiration, a lot of what you are doing is like Hildegard, and she even had a script for it. Quite an ugly one, but... So there we have it. That rather comes to the end of what I have to say, except that I have flourished from this list. I have brought my invented language into the open. I was outed by somebody, NPR, an absolutely dreadful NPR interview, and she even has grammar. And she made up words like it. It has led me into research projects that I never thought I would do. It taught me HTML. So I rapidly learned HTML so I could put my Conlang on display. And I did the web pages for my English department because of my expertise in that. So it has taken me in a lot of directions. I'm very, very happy to be here, and thanks to you all, and here's to you all. By the way, I do have a tiny little display that I squeezed in there, and my name, the name of my language is Tailnoth, and I'm Sally Case. I should have said that.
Any questions? People who have questions, please, do not drop your laptops. Please project. And Sally back. And David also, please.
I think we can if the speaker repeats the question,
it helps.
It is often good.
Hopefully we'll have something of their question. Go.
Okay, well I suppose Hildegard's script looks nothing like Tamar.
Let me find it. It's actually fairly ugly, but there was one manuscript that is now lost to us, the Codex Vindobenensis, that has her script in it. And let me see if I can find. Oh, there are the pictures here. Well, here is a picture that I took of the beginning of it. She boldly announces her name. Let's see, Simplicem hominem Hildegardum Corlatus. All right, lingua ignota Simplicem hominem Hildegardum Corlatus, an unknown language brought forward. And as you can see, it's really difficult to read. She has her Isparis, for instance, is Spiritus, and so I had to work through that. And here, and I don't think you can see it, is her script. But I can pass it around, all right? I can pass it around later, or now.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing, which I realized I didn't do, which was all of the people who've been caretakers of the list over time. So it started with John Ross, it moved very quickly to Thorin at Denmark, Diku DK. Thorin at Diku.dk I can remember, and I'm pretty sure he's Matheson, but a lot of people in those days I remembered more from names. Then I did very little intervention, like managed the servers for a while. I turned that over to John Cowan, who was very active on the list when I was not. He did a little more, and then finally it's moved to Heinrich in the last 5 or 6 years. So you know, that's not always a high-profile job, but it sometimes takes some doing, because you know what's going on.
Hi, Sally. This is Jan von Steenbergen. Sorry, Jan, I'm sure I messed you up.
Hello.
Speaking. I know it hasn't anything to do with the subject, but I'd love to seize the occasion and ask you for a small favor. I'd love to hear a few words in Teona live.
Well, shall I repeat what I said? I'm very happy to be here. Let's see. I'm very embarrassed eating Yiddish. I am, as for me, all blushing. All right, eating reddish. As for me, all blushing. As for me, grateful, irreverenti. Let's see. Amo Roshera Montes. When will our hour come? Febreo Pontesso, we are all Febreo. This is a very complicated term, meaning that we are so. Amaroshera the Montes, Carido Palahata. No, I can't remember that one. Amaroshera the Montes, Febreo Pontesso, Poto to Febreo, Totel de Cervantea. Is that enough? So sing to the right Lord, which is me, okay, who will make them come to life, right?
Hold on a moment. So we've got two of the first people on Conlang. I'm just wondering who the audience was here for the founding of Conlang. Raise your hand.
Well,
Close to it?
let's like
Close to it.
Conlang list.
Conlang
Yes,
list.
not Conlanging in general. That would be Hildegard or something.
like the very first one around before it moved to Denmark, before it moved to the national list.
Yeah. So no, were you on before it was at Denmark?
No, I joined when it was in Denmark.
That's Tony Harris. Yeah.
And I joined Denmark.
Yeah.
Oh, and when you Speak up, please say your name. Amanda.
Amanda Babcock, as I was then. I was on the list since 92 or 91 or so when I was on Denmark.
Okay. Do we have any further questions? No? In that case, David, I think you're up. If I'm remembering correctly. Yes, sir.